Welcome back, Rebels.
You should always be safe and careful.
You should definitely always be safe and careful. Never do anything stupid.
Yeah, I really hope that over the years of us doing this podcast, I know it hasn't been years, but over the time of
it's felt like years.
Over the time of you guys listening to this podcast, I hope that you're not cherry picking the bits that you want to hear. I hope that you're not going, fuck a 9 to 5. I want to have fun and do a creative job all the time. And that you've also picked up that, like, yes, I can leave this shit job that I hate, but only when I'm ready and when my side hustle is like big enough for me to step into it and I'm fully prepared and I have a safety net and everything is safe around me.
Yeah, it's funny because there's actually like a definition of what intelligence is, and that's being able to support your own opinion, which is why people get in this cycle of like consuming the news that really like amplifies what they already believe in. So if you are cherry picking, fair enough, because that means you're very intelligent, but stop it. Like, you need to start being responsible.
Yeah, I think so. We've been getting a lot of messages recently, and pandemic has been a huge time for people to take that time to reflect, and a lot of people have realized that they're really unhappy in what they're doing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to find automatic happiness in quitting that job and starting something else. And I want you guys to be safe and responsible in moving forward. Like, everything does involve risk, but I hope that you're not going to the stage of where if this fails, I'm going to be like completely destitute, because that's not what we want. We want, like, yes, take a risk with something, like fucking, like we risked so much doing what we did, but we never risked like becoming homeless or like our relationships or whatever it might be.
Yeah, there's different levels of risk, isn't there? There's the level of risk of taking everything you own into a casino and putting it all on red just to hope that you can double it or go completely bankrupt. But it's judging it and making sure that it's a level of risk which you can afford to lose. I think it's like with gambling with anything. Effectively, you're gambling with stuff. So it's like making sure that if you're going to gamble, make sure you're so aware of what could happen and make sure it's in your favor as much as possible. Because I think if you are going to drop out of school, like leave a job, any of those things that are massive life changes, that you've got something there ready to go into. So I think it's really important that if you want to start something on the side, if you want to move and start going freelance or your own, whatever it is, that's built up before you go to quit whatever you're doing. You make sure that there's a transition period where you're like, okay, well, actually now my side project, this thing that I've been doing on the side for however long, has got to a stage now where it's basically drawing me away from what I'm doing day to day. And I think as soon as that starts to happen, when you're like, I don't actually have time to push towards both of these things, that's when you can start to leap, when it's actually kind of demanding it of you rather than just thinking, I'm just going to jump now and hope that it catches me along the way.
I heard this amazing thing the other day that was life. The meaning of life is brain chemistry, and how you feel about yourself is really ultimately the only thing that matters. And everything that we do is for brain chemistry. Like, we do things to feel certain ways. And even if we are miserable at a certain job, the reason that we keep at that job is because we feel that we need it to support ourselves and we feel safe. So the safety overrides the feeling of misery of going in every day and sitting next to Karen.
Yeah, because I suppose on that, it's like we're designed to survive. That's like our most basic human instinct. And if by being in that job that we don't like allows us to survive, that's the thing that we're going to continue to do.
So then when you look at what does success mean to you, I know that these decisions are going to support me becoming the success that I want to see. And for everyone, that is completely different. So I think we need to get rid of these ideas of success that are just very cliched, big house, big car, because we know for a fact, for a 100% fact, that does not make people happy. Like, that's science fact, kids.
Yeah, I think the big house, big car thing is really interesting because that's generally, it's almost like someone else's view of success that you're now putting on yourself to be like, oh, I want to achieve that because that's what I'm supposed to do, because that's what society says that is successful, this big house, this big car. But actually, like, well, what would you be happy with? Like, if you're walking down the street with £10 million houses, you're like, one day I'm going to buy one of those. actually, well, what percentage of the population will actually own one of those, and what kind of jobs do those people have to be able to go and afford one of those houses? Actually, it might not be something you want to do at all. There's a good chance that, especially if you're listening to this podcast, you're quite a creative person, you're looking to do something creative with your life. I would almost bet 95% of those houses at least are owned by people in the finance, kind of banking, law sector, those jobs that earn a really, really large amount of money. But those people generally sacrificing their day-to-day happiness. So it's really thinking like, well, what is achievable? What would actually make me happy? It doesn't need to be this £10 million house. It could be just a regular house, because that is fine. Like, that's what you should be aiming for. It's like, look at whoever's top in your field and then maybe think, okay, what is achievable here, rather than just having some pie in the sky dream that the media have told us that by having a nice house, a nice car, that's what we need to be successful.
Yeah, we really spoke about that in the Rebecca Henderson episode of the way that capitalism is set up is consistently we are all being made to feel less than, so that we buy the products to fill that void. And though that product will fill that void for a very, very short space of time, and then we have to go on to the next thing. And as soon as you realize that that is just a trap that so many people are caught in, and you can rise above that and not be caught by it yourself, it's like a superpower. It's like when I get all of these like Instagram ads and like we're being bombarded at all times, but it's quite a nice feeling to go, I don't need that. Like, literally do not need that. It's such a lovely feeling of knowing that you don't have to conform to the sticky trap that everyone else is stuck in.
And I think what's really interesting, it's something that I've observed, like quite often at the weekends we'll go for like nice walks around like nice areas with these big, beautiful houses. And one thing I notice a lot is that no one has a flashy car. Like, quite often if people live in like a beautiful house in the countryside, they just drive a really standard car. They're not being overly flashy with it, which I think is really interesting. Because when you realize actually the people who do have all that money aren't trying to be flashy, they're not trying to buy those things, then it really kind of skews your perception, because actually it's just the media that's being put out there that makes us think that we need to drive a Lamborghini or a sports car or something like that to be successful.
On my goals, there's definitely a certain amount of money that I want to achieve. But I understand that it's around pleasure. It's around the things that bring me pleasure. So like my toy room, my toy collection, my sneakers, like all of the stupid shit that brings me pleasure. But it doesn't tie around my happiness. And so it's not like if in 5 years' time I've not got to the financial goal that I've set myself, it's like, well, maybe my house won't be as fancy, but I'm still going to be just as happy because I'm making sure that I'm ticking off my other goals of like being creative, using this show to reach and help as many people as we can, like bringing in new opportunities for the company, speaking on big stages, all of these things that I know actually make me happy. Then that's the key. But like, I definitely want to be successful, and I definitely want to make a shit ton of money. We both do. We're both like really driven in that aspect, and I don't think there should be any shame around that. Like go and get the bag, man. Like fucking make a load of money. We all want you to be like super successful, but don't let it fucking tie you down, and don't let it become this obsession, because like it's just not worth it. Like it won't fulfill you. It won't. It's not gonna like change internally the person that you are. The person who you are is who you are.
Yeah, I think it's so bloody cliche, but it's like, just be happy with what you've got. I think a lot of the times it's so important to just look at what you do have and appreciate that for what it is. Because I think then when you actually go and earn something that is more than that, you get so much more from it. It's like, if I'm happy with where I am now, anything else is a bonus. And I think that's a really nice mindset to have, like appreciate where you are, the fact that you do have a roof over your head, the fact that you can still afford to buy stuff, like just appreciate that. And then, yeah, just level up from there rather than having some huge goal in your head that you'll never achieve. Because I feel like if you set yourself something that is unachievable, you're never going to be happy because you're never going to get there, especially if it is a goal that you've just basically picked because you've seen it on TV and think, oh, that's what I want. I've watched Cribs, I've watched Selling Sunset, and those are the kind of houses that I want. It's like, by having more of a realistic goal and just being more like content with what you currently have, you will be so much more happier from that. And I think that's really important.
So we're in a real kind of unstable time where like we're all of us are all over the place. Don't beat yourself up about that. Like it's pandy times. It's fucking weird. Like we've none of us have been through anything like this before. So we're all just riding on this weird wave. But I want you guys to like be smart. Look at the look before you leap, and listen to your internal voice. Like whatever it is that you're currently wondering about, that you've got this kind of instinct about, and there's something that's holding you back from actually doing it, you're probably right. Like you probably know yourself better than anyone else knows themselves, and like take that chance. Make sure you're safe, but take that chance.
As we said at the start, it is that safety that is so important. It's making sure that if you do leap, there's something there to catch you. The fact that you've built up something on the side that is big enough that it can support you, even if it means you're going to have to take some form of pay cut, it's still there to keep, like, it's still there. It's allowing you to survive, whether that is a buffer that you've saved in advance to make sure that even if no work comes in for the next year, you've still got that in the bank, or just a company that you've set up that you've got a few freelance clients that you already have there. So if you do switch and go full-time in your side project, which will now become your main project, there's enough there to support you. You're not just going into nothing.
Yes. So keep the DMs coming. Love seeing what you guys are up to. So yeah, keep in touch. This episode, to segue beautifully, is with Ben Jeffries, who has definitely listened to his own voice and gone against advice that people have given him, and ultimately, like, he was in the right. This is our final episode with Adobe.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this series we've done with Adobe. This is the final one of the 8-part series we've done with them. And I think it's just been great, the fact they've supported us on this journey of talking to these great creators over the past 8 weeks. And as we've said before, Adobe have actually said, like, if you can sign up through the link creativerebels.co/Adobe, you'll get a free trial there to use the Adobe products. And then we'll actually get a small commission on everything if you do sign up going forward. So if you're thinking about using some Adobe products, like, if you sign up for that link, you'll help us out, which will be absolutely great.
Yes, that is creativerebels.co/Adobe. Go and check out the free trial. And yeah, I mean, if you're starting a business, you're pretty much going to need to be using those tools. So
yeah.
So yeah, get on it.
Cool. So let's get into this episode with Ben Jeffries.
Yes, indeed. Ben Jeffries is an entrepreneur and founder of the influencer marketing platform Influencer, which is a great name that they managed to get. Ben started the company at just 21 years old with co-founder, YouTuber Casper Lee, and has grown a hugely successful pandemic-proof company. Ben took the massive decision to drop out of university to follow his passion and hasn't looked back since.
Welcome to the show, dude.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Really excited to be a part of it.
So, as most 15-year-old boys, you decided to start a t-shirt brand. I think we've all been there. Adam and I can certainly relate to having those dreams.
Yeah.
But you actually did it.
Yeah, I think it was one of those things where, as you said, I think most 15-year-old, kids see perhaps, the hypes of the world or these like urban streetwear brands and think it'd be something really cool to do. And I just kind of decided that me and my friends had this saying, which was basically chatting breeze, that wouldn't it be funny to actually put that word breeze onto an actual streetwear brand? So had a bit of demand before I actually went over to actually do the actual brand itself. So I kind of just went for the punt, so to speak.
And what did that demand look like at the time? Just your friends, or? Yeah,
it's in like, I guess just chatting throughout our mates, just saying, wouldn't it be cool if someone actually put the word breeze on a t-shirt or put the word breeze, on a cap or rucksack. So because those conversations were already alive, it was like, okay, well, let's see if, how easy it is or how hard it actually is to make a clothing brand, and then see where I can take it. So I was always had like a keen interest in graphic design. So I basically designed a logo myself, and then sent it, out to a couple of merchandise houses to see if they could actually help me, turn this, I guess, idea into reality. And it was when, I spoke to a couple. There was one down in Cardiff called Awesome Merchandise, actually, who were able to just do it, really, really easy for me. So it kind of seemed a no-brainer because I'd had that demand, and I thought I designed something quite cool from a graphic design perspective.
And what did that look like when it came back? Because I know most people, when they start a clothing brand as a teenager, might make 1 or 2 t-shirts or order a batch of t-shirts and then be like, how am I going to sell these?
Oh yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, I think the first like sort of rounds of products which turned up, it was more like, oh my god, what on earth is this that I've actually designed? Is anyone going to actually purchase this? But I think after a couple of rounds of changes to make sure that it was exactly what people would actually wear and actually buy, and with some help of some I guess useful marketing techniques, it was able to I guess gain a little bit of traction. But I think the actual funny thing about this whole clothing brand is, I guess the phrase chatting breeze was actually chatting shit, essentially. So essentially what I was selling was a clothing brand which had the word shit on it. So, but, managed to get, still drum up interest, and, allowed me to have, I guess, my first dip into what marketing would look like, and, how I could gain some skills in there to, I guess, propel other brands in the future.
What we always say to listeners of the show is that until you start something, you don't know where it's going to take you. And I think having the courage and actually, like, as I said a minute ago, like all 15-year-old boys want to start a t-shirt business, but through actually starting it, you can then discover what you're interested in. And if that's no longer t-shirt making, it can kind of propel you into what it is that you are interested in. So what were some of the things that happened around the t-shirt brand that sort of fueled what you're doing now?
For anyone who sort of sets off a business, who knows exactly where the business is initially going to be in 3 to 5 years time, I can bet you that they're actually lying about it. I think it's important to have a vague idea of sort of where you want to take it, and to I guess be having that as your goal and your aim. But realistically, the amount of pivots you'll always go through is uncanny. I think for us, or for me in the Breeze days, it was okay. Well, it got my appetite into social media advertising and influencer marketing. So from social media advertising, I was realizing the power of if you could play on the algorithms of how many interest you could get on your page. So when Breeze was about, I grew our Facebook page to 50,000 likes very, very quickly by just holding a competition on the Breeze Clothing Facebook page. And naturally, because the algorithm on Facebook really favored strong engagement, then it was pushing it out to other people who were then able to discover the brand through that. And that's what got my interests into I guess, what social media was back then. And that was, one avenue I went down. The other avenue was, I'm a massive Chelsea Football Club fan, so sorry if that offends any listeners. But, big Chelsea fan, probably keeping that a bit quiet after the weekend's result. But anyway, with that, I reached out to a bunch of Chelsea reserve team players. And, I always knew that if celebrities wore your clothes, you were able to really propel a brand completely out there. And I thought, well, if I can get some Chelsea players to wear my clothes, that would be, absolutely incredible. Of course, I didn't know any actual first team players, nor were they really reachable or, accessible. So I reached out to a bunch of reserve team players who had like 10, 15,000 followers at the time. We're talking about names like, Josh Blackman, Josh McEachran, these smaller players who have gone on to do some things now, but back in the day they were relatively unheard of. But for those who were actually a true Chelsea fan, they would actually know who these players were because they would follow them. So anyway, managed to get through to them, sent them some of my clothes and said, look, if I pay you 50 quid, can you do a tweet about my clothing brand? And they were more than happy to. And I was noticing I was getting a really good response from these smaller celebrities on social media. And I suppose that's kind of stemmed into what, micro influencers are today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of, took those learnings, took that network of not just Chelsea reserve team players. It did branch out into other, sporting team reserve team players and other people who had these smaller followings on social media, and essentially see, where I could take it. And yeah, took this network and then essentially went into setting up, I guess, what Influencer is today as a business.
And in what ways were you reaching out to these players? Were you just dropping them like a message on social media? Were you emailing them? And
it was literally to be honest, using the word, spam, like spamming them on every possible way I could. I mean, messaging them on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, email. I think, you've got to be open to just being a little bit cheeky when you're, in those first, rounds of business. To really get that growth, you have to be cheeky and just hustle your way through everything and just message. And, obviously some won't actually ever get back to you, but those who do get back to you, you can start forming those relationships with. It's actually quite funny. So being that Chelsea Football Club fan I mentioned, I obviously tried to hustle my way too much to John Terry because he actually ended up blocking me on Instagram, and he still blocked me to this day, which is heartbreak because he's obviously, captain, leader, legend. But yeah.
It's funny with those, you sort of feel like when you're first starting out and there's that kind of real imbalance when you're reaching out to those bigger people, it's almost like if you shoot your shot too early, because it's like now I'm sure those DMs, a lot more DMs are going to be open and accessible to you because you've established yourself.
Yeah, 100%. But, I think it's just about hustling. And I think, people will, a lot of celebrities and a lot of influencers do respect to hustle because themselves, they've hustled to get to the positions where they are themselves. So I think that's, in all walks of life, whether that's not even just, influencer marketing, but just in business. I think, a lot of people who've made it to certain positions where they've done that through hustling. So I think people respect fellow hustlers in a way.
Saying we were actually talking about this earlier, and how if you can find someone who's definitely gone through the journey that you've been through, contacting them is going to give you a way bigger chance than someone who hasn't. Because if you know someone's gone through that grind and they've started from nothing, then they're way more likely to say yes to you than someone who has just kind of had it handed to them.
Completely agree with you in that sense. I think you got to, I guess, adapt your strategy in how you're reaching out to people based on what you can see from their profile. The way I would hustle to get an influencer on board to the business would be very different to how I try and get a CMO to give us their brand cash. So different sort of hustles, but, certainly still nonetheless, hustling.
Do you have any secret techniques for the DM? Because obviously people are getting bombarded at all times. How do you stand out just in the DMs?
I think, there's two things with that. Number one is, be personable. Everyone hates, a message which is quite clearly a mass spam message. So there's something you can include which is personal, even if it's just looking through, whether it be on Instagram, looking through their 9 most recent photos and picking up a theme and then messaging them based off that, or if it's looking at someone on LinkedIn, spotting something from their their LinkedIn profile which they've mentioned in one of their job roles. It might be that you went to a similar university to someone, or you might have studied something similar. Something where there's some element of, I guess, connection, which you can start the conversation off. People are much more willing to start the conversation off based on the back of your message.
Yeah, something that I do, which I feel like works really well, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying about the 9 things. It's like having that bit of relative, the recent context. So I'll quite often, if there's someone I want to get in contact with, and maybe I've DM'd them and it's just gone through the night, they never see it, I'll wait until they post a story and then reply to that story, because then it's way more likely to be seen by them, a reaction to a story, than just a cold DM. So if they do something, I'll react to that story in a genuine way of my response, what I thought of it, or what, if they've asked a question, I'll answer the question and then start a conversation from there. So it's almost like they've opened it up for some kind of reaction because they've put the story out there. So I feel like that's quite a good way in.
100%. It's not just necessarily go straight in with the kill, so to speak. But I think also, there are other techniques as well where you can perhaps play to someone's ego as such. Mm-hmm. So if you can see that they're clearly very proud of something on either their social channels, then bring that up and say, I saw you were recently XYZ. Massive congrats. I'd love to go for a coffee with you, or I'd love to talk to you about XYZ. So I think there are certainly different techniques you can do to improve that hustle.
Now, Ben, you're probably bored of getting asked about your age, because I know it comes up so often, you being such a young founder. But how did you find it when you were starting out, being taken seriously? Were you taken seriously because people were this is social media and this is a younger person that understands it? Or did you find yourselves in rooms where just your age was kind of being held against you?
Yeah, my age was certainly in the early days being held against me, with certain meetings. So I remember actually going to pitch for a client, and at the end of the meeting, they were all a bit cold, and I couldn't really necessarily understand why. Also, I thought I'd worked really hard on this pitch, and I thought, it would do well. Anyway, after I left, within like 15 minutes of leaving, they actually messaged me saying, thanks for coming in. Was great to hear about your, I use the exact phrase, little project. Best wishes for everything in the future. Currently, we're going for someone a little bit more experienced. And it was like, it was more just the way that they respond in that manner. I think you can always give someone a certain amount of respect, especially when they put effort into something. So that, really, I guess, grinded my gears, as they say. But then on the flip side, you're right. There are some people who you'd go in and pitch and they'd be like, yes, this person gets it because, they're the sort of age where it works. Or, the biggest users of perhaps a different social channel, or they're the peak age. So it wasn't all doom and gloom, and it wasn't all, championing every meeting. Because of my age, there are obviously certain things which I guess helped position things. And I think, when influence was growing, and when my co-founder Casper came on board, and Casper himself is, one of the world's leading influencers, that added a lot of authenticity to the brand of influencer, where it was kind of like, okay, well, this brand has to be taken seriously almost because this guy's involved. So I think that added, some strong weight. And I guess, as stuff, starts building up, you build those more case studies, you build better relationships, then again, it helps just to, I guess, build that image where people, then have to take you seriously. And helps having that strong brand.
Yeah, getting that cosign is so important. It's like me and Adam could have done a podcast. I mean, we often get feedback of, I love your intros of just you guys talking. But had we not got a lot of the big guests on that we've got, then I don't think people would, definitely not as many listeners would be tuning in, because they wouldn't have discovered the show because we didn't have the cosign of those big guests when we were starting out. So I think it can be such a huge boost for people, and especially when you meet someone where your skills kind of are, if their skill is over here and your skills are over here, and you can kind of meld like that, which it sounds like that's what happened with you and Casper. You both had very different skill sets, but brought together, you were really powerful together.
100%. I think, a phrase Casper always has said to me is, the only way to grow is to make things with, I guess, people smarter than you. But the most ironic thing is that's how everyone should think. You should always be bringing in people who are smarter than you around the business. I mean, that's how we've grown today, is that, we've consistently hired people who are better than us at doing, the roles that they're doing. And it's that complementary skill set, which enables companies to grow. And you shouldn't be afraid as well. I think, especially when you're starting off as a business, you shouldn't be afraid to relinquish some of that control, because it's often very hard to do that, because it's like, it's your company, it's your baby as such. But you do realize that there are obviously people who are experts in certain fields, and, you don't want to be that jack of all trades, master of none. You want to find those masters of some who are able to complement, so that together you're a master of all as a business.
So what do the early days look like then, before you've met Casper and you have this idea, I'm going to set up a marketing influencer agency? I mean, I wouldn't know where to start. So what do you do?
So in the very early days, as I said, I had these like network of creators, whether they were the reserve team footballers or whether they were just creators who had, those low social media followings. And I built up this network, and I kind of, packaged it all up. I designed a pitch deck, and I was sending it out to brands with the case study of what I was able to do with Breeze, and then some other brands that, were able to softly try it as well. And as I said, it's just about building that credibility. So the more case studies that you get, the more, more senior brands will be able to take you seriously, because you have those creds which enable them to trust you to be able to do it.
I think what's really interesting there is the fact that your first case study was something that you did for yourself for free. And I think that is so important when getting started with something, when you've not got any clients who are willing to pay for something, it's to go out there and create your own case study. Like so many people that we've talked to on this show have started off their career by effectively going to do something for themselves and then using the skills and like what they've learned there as their first case study going forward to clients.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's so important that, don't think that not having a case study is a blocker. If you can believe in your product that much, then you should be able to, either offer it to a few people, maybe on a smaller scale to initially trial to get that initial rounds of feedback, or be able to, have it as a, outcomes based so that, you can actually then still get remunerated for it. But there's little, risk to someone actually testing it out and trialing it with you.
So as influencers getting started and you've started to reach out to people, how does it then turn into a business? Like, how do you get your first clients?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I suppose it again goes back to that element of hustle. I think right in the early days, I was looking at who was spending on, Instagram adverts, Facebook adverts, and thought, okay, well, they would be the natural people who would also be interested in them putting money through people who had these large social followings. And I was even doing the old, looking on a, when I was sitting on a tube, seeing who was advertising all around me, writing all the brand names down, and then reaching out after them by just finding their marketing managers on LinkedIn. And I think, then it was very much a case of word of mouth spreads. People move around to different companies as well. You might have worked with a marketing manager who's at company A, and then 6 months later they're at company B, which obviously helps because if you're still doing a good job at company A, you have the case studies of both continuing. And I think it is just, as I said, just seeing where other people are advertising and saying, okay, well, if they're spending money there, then it's about seeing, will they then move to spend money on influencer marketing?
Yeah. In researching you, I heard you say so many times about building meaningful relationships. That seems something that's obviously like really, really important to you. Why is building meaningful relationships so important?
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. So I think first and foremost, it's much cheaper to retain a client than it is to consistently keep winning new clients, right?
Yeah.
And it's so important that when you're building that meaningful relationship at first with your clients, that you're truly understanding what they want to achieve from, what you're doing with them. It's important to understand all the KPIs up front, so that at the end, you can exactly tell them what you've delivered against what the expectations were at the start. Now, we really ingrain that into our business. So we say that we're building meaningful relationships between the creators that we work with and the brands that we work with. And we do that by, understanding the brand expectations up front, but also understanding, do those creators' expectations from what they think their content will match that of the brand expectations. It's really, really important to be doing that. And we're very data-driven influencers. It's probably a phrase which you hear a lot, but, we invest very heavily into the data that we have, and that helps to build that more meaningful relationship, because we can understand the data behind the creators, we can understand the data behind the brands to ensure that that relationship being built is built on so much more than just what they say, but, the personality behind them, the data behind them, and multiple different layers.
So you and your team are obviously like experts when it comes to data, like it's something you spend a lot of time with. Like someone kind of who's starting a small business, someone who's kind of a small creator themselves, how can they use data to their advantage to help drive traffic?
At the start, there probably wasn't as much data involved as there is now. And I think there was a lot of manual processing of data, whether that be, getting the data directly from the brand on their own social listening, or getting that data directly from the creators from screenshots behind their profiles. But since then, we've obviously moved over to, having like IBM Watson, for example, power our, building of campaigns and building that meaningful relationship. So we've been able to grow and provide, I guess, more accurate data. But from the same note, there's nothing wrong with at the start not having the most accurate data. At least you can explain what the data means, because there is so much data out there that people just want you, A, not to just bullshit them, and B, just tell them what, how this data is advantageous to them as, the people spending the money on it.
And as a creator, how can I find out who my audience is and work out how best to kind of serve them?
So, there's two routes. Obviously, all the social networks have their own tools behind them. So whether that be YouTube having their creator studio, Instagram as well having their creator studio, you can access the analytics within the app, but if you actually log on the web version, there's a lot more data as well. But when you connect yourselves to various platforms, so the influencer.com platform, we give you what the data insights we have on you, from what your personality insights are saying, from what you're saying on content, on the content that you've been posting, what your audience is actually saying about you in the comments that they're writing on you. We collect all this data to help better shape, better map you up against other creators to brands that you're working with to build that more meaningful relationship.
Do you ever have any sort of resistance in terms of the word influencer? It sets off a very definite kind of stereotype in people's minds. How do you combat that?
100%. I think for us, one thing which is quite funny is despite our name being influencer, you won't see a single mention of, an actual creator being called an influencer on our website. And that's because we focus on the influential content creators. So those people who've bought, who've built their audience, certainly not bought, built their audience because of the content that they've created. And, we really believe in those, those authentic trailblazers who were perhaps a niche food blogger or a fashion blogger who've, grown their audiences based off that, rather than necessarily just being on a reality TV show and jumped up their following very quickly.
One thing I thought was really, really interesting that you said before is when it comes down to the money split between kind of media spend and creative spend. And I think you said kind of 60% media spend to 40% creative spend. I thought that was great, the fact that you're really promoting spending money on creative.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's so important to see that influencer marketing isn't just a media spend, and that although there is obviously that audience amplification when you're putting it through their followers, there's certainly that creative spend, because obviously these content creators are experts in producing this amount of content, and this content obviously takes them a considerable amount of time to actually create themselves as well. So it's so important to see that as two different moving parts, as you said, the creative spend and the media spend.
How did you manage to get hold of the @influencer handle?
It's a really good question. I think I'm much prouder of the @influencer handle than I am of influencer.com. I think influencer.com's cool, but the Instagram handle is the real winner. Actually, funny enough, our first Instagram handle was Influencer Co. And then I managed to, I guess, somehow just persuade someone who was sitting on the handle to not massively overprice me and charge it. So I did have to pay for it off someone, but best amount of money ever spent.
Another thing I've heard you talk about is how important culture is within a business. How would you describe the culture at Influencer, and how have you kind of curated that to be something that you're proud of?
Culture to me is definitely one of the most important things. One thing I'm really proud of at Influencer is that no one's ever actually quit Influencer. One person's quit Influencer, but she asked for her job back 2 weeks later. And we gave her a job back, of course. But it's something which I suppose we've just, managed to spend a lot of time in investing in our team and making sure our team really feel brought along the journey with us, because ultimately the only way we've been able to get to where we've got today is because every single one of their hard work. So it's just about ensuring that they feel as much as part of the story as every single person in the company does. So that's something, which we take, great pride in, and we do that through, having some various cool perks, where that be, some outrageous sort of like summer parties, Christmas parties, but also just investing in things like, their mental health and things like, doing regular like mindfulness sessions. So making sure they really feel part of, a family influencer. And values is something which we really do promote internally. We've got a number of values internally, which go from, like breaking boundaries together, to not just following and influencing, and we really try and install them in every single meeting that we have as a company, all hands. So that's also something which we're really proud of, is we're very transparent with the company. So we're always telling them, what our growth plans are for the business in the next 90 days, what our growth plans are in the next 12 months, the next 3 years, just so that, as I said, we're bringing them along that story, but we're also holding ourselves to account by telling them all of this, so that we are all understanding, where the business has the plans and the clear pathway to growth.
And also, obviously, we're recording this in 2020 now, which is kind of COVID year, as I feel like it'll be known forever. How have you seen influencer marketing change, like since like the lockdown in the UK in March?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, because I think, April and May, things certainly dipped. I think advertisers worldwide just put, pauses on their advertising. Like Pepsi and Coca-Cola for the first time, basically ever. So paused all advertising activity. But, as things have, I guess, come slightly back to normal, although not really, at least brands have understood how best to advertise during, I guess, the new COVID world. I hate to use the phrase "the new normal," but I'll go for the new COVID world. But they've adapted there, and creative is now more important than ever. We actually have just hired a head of content strategy who was from Maker Studios and then Disney, to help really improve our existing creative offering to advertisers, because we understand the importance of getting it right at the moment. So creative is something which has certainly been at the forefront of everyone's mind during COVID. But yeah, as I said, April and May sort of dipped, but then July was a record month, and then August and September have been growing as well. So I think it obviously depends on how government legislation goes and all the rest of it, because that will obviously adapt various marketing strategies. But I think given that people are spending, much more times on social media now and using it to get closer to creators and the brands that they perhaps aren't able to get as close to because of, restrictions, we're certainly seeing the market grow.
It's interesting because when we started our first business, Graffiti Life, like we paint murals for kind of offices, a lot of advertising campaigns, like all sorts of things now. Like we started that kind of in 2009 off the back of the last recession, when again, all ad spend was down, everything just wasn't great. But I feel like because we came at it with like a creative approach, it was like people were used to seeing billboards, but as soon as we went to hand paint it, it was like, this is something new, this is something special. And I feel like creativity really won there. And that's kind of what allowed us to survive in such like a hard time. How do you think creativity will be change in terms of people's perspectives over the coming like months and years?
Yeah, so I mean, one of our core values internally is creativity with a purpose. And I think the key word there is obviously with a purpose, or the key phrase in that is with a purpose, because it's so important that, during these times as well, that you're sensitive. We've seen some of, ad campaigns getting certain backlashes. We've seen certain campaigns really actually, get it right as well. So I think creativity's evolved where people need to be a little bit more conscious and, sensitive, but from the same notes, also don't be afraid to think of it outside the box to sort of, I guess, get that feeling back that everyone's there together. And I think I actually saw, I think it was done by Mother, but it was for TfL, one of the best advertisement campaigns I've seen at the moment, which is just simply a heart within the words and be kind in the middle. And it's just putting that emotion back into the creative, where it's really allowing people to, understand that we're all in this together, and that, you should be kind at the moment. And I think, it's so important at the moment.
That just makes me think of that Kylie Jenner Pepsi commercial, which I feel just did everything wrong, especially when it comes to sort of using an influencer. And I think the advantage you have of being sort of a younger founder is understanding those. Like, I'm not saying that there's no kind of older founders, but you feel like me and Ad spend a lot of our time visiting different agencies. And sometimes you feel within those structures that they are very much a machine, that there's no kind of voices heard. And I feel that Pepsi advert came about because no one had the courage to stand up and go, hang on, we're kind of painting Kylie Jenner as a white savior. This is completely ridiculous. And I feel like in a company like yours, where you've got a younger founder, where you've got a team whose their values all align, it's like that content's not going to get through because you have this filter of everyone that knows what they believe in, and they know the content that they want to create is going to be more positive. It's creativity with a purpose.
I think creativity with a purpose is so important, and you do have situations where brands can get it so wrong, but you also have situations where brands have been really nailing it on the head right now. And I think, although it's important to have, those young trailblazers involved in the discussion so that you're getting, I guess, that diversity in discussion, I do still think that it's so important to have that experience in the room for, people to be able to speak from what they've seen in the past and, worked on in the past, to really aid and ensure that creative is going down, the right path in a certain campaign. So it's always important to have as a diverse room as possible, to ensure that every angle is thought about, and not just perhaps one age demographic or one gender demographic.
So obviously, being in this space, you see a lot of the stuff that does go wrong. Like, what are some of the most common mistakes that people are making with their social media accounts as like a brand or as an individual creator? The
most overused phrase within influence marketing within social media is just the lack of authenticity used, because you often get partnerships where they're not perhaps building that meaningful relationship between the two, and it's just it's so obvious to the consumer who's viewing the advert that there is no way perhaps that creator would actually work with that brand if it wasn't for money. Or perhaps there's no way that that creator would be actually using that product or service. So I think attached to that, it's just being real. It's especially now more than ever, when everyone's just kind of so sick of bullshit, and everyone just kind of wants just honest and open communication, that just be as real as possible right now, and that's how you're going to be able to win on social, especially. And that's why I think we've seen such a huge rise in live content form over COVID, because people have been able to I guess portray or give out their open, honest feedback in an unedited and an unrecorded fashion, which is really appealing to consumers right now, because the only other live sort of content that they'd had to date is news, which unfortunately has gone down a path of being not the most overly enjoyable thing to watch, just because of unfortunately some of the things that have been happening in the world.
So when it comes to working with influencers, is there any kind of coaching you provide them with we've seen the data that these things are working, or is it more of just a kind of you work together with on a brand basis?
So we actually recently partnered with Global Web Index, and we did a report on, I guess, how COVID-19 had impacted influence marketing. And what that actually went into detail with wasn't just, what brand behavior was like at the moment, but also how, what creative behavior was best performing. So was that, how-to tutorial videos, or was that, hauls and things like that. So we do certainly gather data on the creator side to help better inform them on, what's relevant right now, what can help them get those views as well. But ultimately, it also stems down to, that phrase of being real again and being authentic, because creators do know their audience the best. We can guide them on trends, but it really is the creators and their audiences who understand that, the best.
Adam and I obviously know about what goes into setting up a business. And when you were setting up Influencer, how, did you have to make any sacrifices? Was there anything that that really suffered because you were basically working on the business full time?
Yeah, so I actually, I was at Bath University studying business at the time of when I was setting up Influencer, and actually dropped out of university. It was probably one of the biggest gambles I've ever taken, especially as, I suppose, when we're at that age, everyone's drilled in on how important going to university is. And I suppose as I'd managed to get into university and it was a good university for the course that I wanted to study, there was that extra added element of pressure. But what I've learnt since dropping out is completely unparalleled to what I would have learned at university. And that's not to say that everyone who drops out or doesn't go to university will be able to, learn much more than they would do at university. University is very right for some people as well. And I think that's a really, really important point, because I often get asked that quite a lot. Like, oh, does that mean I should just drop out? Or does that mean I should go to university? It's right for different people. It really depends on what your focus is. But I do think if you're very passionate about something and you're willing to commit to those hours and you're willing to commit to initially a lot of, I suppose, not necessarily failures, and that's something which is really important to note, is that you shouldn't see things as failures, but mere stepping stones on your way to success. But, if you're willing to be able to listen to a lot of no's and be able to bounce back off that, then, doing something like making that big sacrifice can be worth it further down the line.
Was that a difficult conversation to have with your parents or your kind of teachers?
Yeah, very difficult conversation. Both parents, very traditional, absolutely no way, not going to happen. But then my dad himself had always, had a strong passion for entrepreneurship. So he basically said, look, it's not absolutely no way. It's actually present to us a proper plan of how this is going to work out. And then once, you presented a proper plan, then we can have this discussion together. But I think, it's not something which you should take as a very quick decision. You should put a lot of thought into it. And, it was amazing that after, going back over that plan, then with my dad at the time, I was able to realize perhaps a lot of the things I hadn't initially thought about to make sure that when I did drop out, that I was going on the right path afterwards.
That's very cool. And you're very lucky to have that, because I think for so many people, they just get the flat no. And then you've got the sunk cost fallacy of, oh, well, I've already paid for 2 or 3 or however many terms. And you sort of think, and I got this place, I got offered, there were people who were turned down to come here and I've been offered it. And now I'm just going to walk away from it. And for a lot of parents who are filled with love for their precious babies, for them, it's not conversation. So I think you're really lucky to have open-minded enough parents who were willing to say, okay, let's discuss this, and if you can let's have a reasoned argument, and if you can present your side, then maybe we'll see it that way.
Definitely. And I think one thing which was really interesting and eye-opening is, even when my parents had then finally, agreed to it, a lot of perhaps friends' parents and other, friends as well, were perhaps looking like, why on earth have you made this decision? This is one of the worst decisions you're ever going to have to make. And you've kind of just got to put that to one side and see that as motivation to really prove them wrong, and really put that almost extra added layer of determination to really make it a success.
And do you feel like you've proved them wrong now?
For me, I'm always of the mindset where I'm always climbing a mountain where I always think I can get higher. So I've never got to a stage where I've just sat back and thought, cool, this is exactly where I wanted to be. Partly because I didn't really properly know where I wanted to be at the start. So it's more a case where I think, when we've got influencers to a certain level, then I'll be able to perhaps sit back and, think. But right now I'm in proper, scale up mode, proper growth stage where I just can't wait to keep expanding Influencer and seeing where we can take it. That it hasn't really, necessarily crossed my mind to think, okay, well, I'm content at where we are.
Do you have a vision of like where you would like to be, or is it just a constant process to see where it goes?
I mean, there's of course the ultimate goal that we truly believe that influencer can be that powerhouse of influence marketing on a global, level, and that's something which we're consistently striving towards. I think influencer marketing is essentially, the definition of influencer marketing keeps expanding because so many new companies are kind of spinning off over what influencer marketing actually entails. And we're probably only in 2 out of 5 of the lanes of influencer marketing at the moment. So I'd love to see, how we can really properly, nail the lanes that we're currently in. And then once we've done that, see if we can access any of the other lanes and, really grow out the influencer offering.
What would you say your favorite part of your day-to-day work is?
Without a doubt, being with my team. It is the team that motivate me. It's the team who, as I've used this phrase earlier on, but trailblazers. I think there are so many impressive people in the company who are absolutely smashing it. And it motivates me to know that, they're really learning and they're really, they're really smashing it themselves. So to see us all together in a room, being able to, I guess, have actual movement on an industry is really, really exciting and really, really, it motivates me.
I feel like what you just said there is the reason why you have a good culture. It's because you're more dedicated to your team than you are anything else. Like that is your favorite part. And I'm sure that your staff see that coming back the other way as well.
Yeah, I think, it's so important to invest in your team and just be thankful for everything that your team, the commitment that your team put into the business. I think that's all part of being a startup, and it's important to never forget that because that's really what helps, as you say, build a strong culture at a company and enable the company to grow further.
If you could go back to your younger self, just starting up a t-shirt company, what would be your one piece of advice to that younger self?
It would be, just don't give up. And I think that's the one thing which I've got a very strong mindset where there are multiple times over the years where I've thought, you know what? No, this is it. I know I'm a 22-year-old. I can't be dealing with this much stress, but it's to have that mindset to keep pushing on and, get to where you are and make people who have put that trust and that confidence in you, proud, essentially. And I think that's the most important thing. It's to, put that faith back into to other people that they've put back into you. So, repaying it.
Brilliant.
Obviously, Casper's been huge in helping you. Is your co-founder and setting up the business, everything like that. Have you had any other mentors? And if so, what's the best advice that you've been given from those mentors?
I've certainly had, loads of mentors, both, directly, I guess, with an interest in influencer, and also just people who I've looked up and, been inspired by, whether that be, probably the most cliche ones like the Gary Vaynerchuk or the Simon Sinek. Like, I love Simon Sinek's videos. They're really, really, they help me with my mindset, certainly in leadership and in business. But in terms of direct ones within influence, I think it's so important to be surrounding yourself by as many mentors as possible, because ultimately these ones have had the experience in the past and are able to be those sounding boards and help you propel to where you want to be. So obviously Casper's that fantastic co-founder that I've got who's able, who are able to just be so close to an advice. But, we've also brought on board someone called Adam Ludwig, who was the co-founder of a business called Captify. He's been an incredible mentor because he's scaled up his business to almost £100 million revenue which is incredible. And he's been in the advertising space and learned a lot from how he's been able to scale that up. But, a bunch of other mentors as well, from people who have been lawyers, from people who've been involved in scaling up Series A's. So, I can't thank enough for any mentors that I've had, but I would always just suggest that everyone surrounds themselves with mentors, because it's the way in which they will learn, most importantly.
Brilliant. This has been so interesting, dude. Really great to talk to you. How can people find out about you online?
Thank you so much for having me. Really, really appreciate being on this. Please do feel free to add me on LinkedIn. Name's Ben Jeffries, or go to our website, which is influencer.com.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, dude.
Thanks very much, David and Adam. Appreciate it.